Download this code and get free GPT-4o from codegive.com, link in the description below. Certainly. The unknown host exception in Java typically indicates that the application is unable to resolve the host name you specified. When you're working with Docker, this often happens due to networking configurations or service discovery issues, particularly when trying to connect to services running in Docker containers. Understanding unknown host exception. Unknown host exception is a subclass of ioexception that signals that the IP address of a host could not be determined. In the context of Docker, this can happen for a variety of reasons. 1. Misconfigured Docker networking. Your container may not be able to reach the host or other containers. 2. Service not running. The service you're trying to connect to may not be running or is not exposed correctly. 3. Incorrect host name. The host name you are trying to connect to does not exist or is misspelled. Common scenarios. 1. Connecting to a service in another container. If you are trying to connect to a service running in another Docker container using the container's name as the host name. 2. Connecting to the host machine. If you are using localhost or 127.0.0.1 to connect to a service running on the host machine from within a Docker container. Example scenario. Let's consider a scenario where you have a Java application running in a Docker container, and it needs to connect to a database service running in another container. Step-by-step guide. 1. Docker Compose example. We will use Docker Compose to set up a simple Java application and a PostgreSQL database. 2. Directory structure. 3. Dockerfile for Java application, app/dockerfile. 4. Java code, app/src/main.java. 5. Docker Compose file, dockercompose.yml. Running the application. 1. Navigate to the myapp directory in your terminal. 2. Run the Docker Compose command. Troubleshooting unknown host exception. If you encounter an unknown host exception, here are some steps to troubleshoot. 1. Check host name. Ensure that the host name you are using is correct. In the above example, the host name is DB, which corresponds to the PostgreSQL service defined in the dockercompose.yml. 2. Service availability. Make sure that the service you're trying to connect to is running. You can check the logs of the Docker containers using. 3. Networking issues. Ensure that your containers are on the same Docker network. The mynetwork defined in the dockercompose.yml ensures that both the app and DB services can communicate. 4. Container name resolution. Docker provides automatic DNS resolution for containers. If you are running commands outside of Docker, make sure to use the correct IP address or host name. 5. Host connectivity. If you're trying to connect to a service running on the host from the container, use host.docker.internal, for Docker desktop, instead of localhost. Conclusion. The unknown host exception can be a common issue when working with Docker, especially when dealing with inter-container communication. By ensuring correct networking configurations, service availability, and host name accuracy, you can successfully avoid and troubleshoot this exception.